So I know many of you are writing your AMCAS descriptions for all your activities right now, and I know that I am old as hell, and that was like ages ago for me, but at the same time, I also know that it can be intimidating. So I'm going to give you my descriptions. I'm going to show you how I wrote them, and hopefully give you some pieces of advice that you can implement in your own activity section. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. What's up, everyone? So I actually run an AMCAS group for people who are applying to medical school right now, submitting the AMCAS application. I run it with a bunch of my friends who are currently medical students or entering to become medical students, and pretty much everyone in this group is writing their activities section right now. So I want to make this video to briefly help them and use examples from my own AMCAS application, which is a little cringy looking back, but hopefully it at least helps many of you. And of course, before we start, I have to get conflicts of interest and discretions out of the way. This is all my experience. Everything I say is based on my experience. This by no means is the end-all be-all. This by no means is the only way to do things. But with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about how to write these activity descriptions and how I went about it and what I would do differently potentially. So here is the first one. The first main category is meaningful experiences. And you guys all know that there's a certain character limit here for which you will write your experience description. And underneath, they give you, I think, a couple more thousand characters or so to write about the most meaningful and why it is most meaningful. So for this, my experience description, what I would do is talk a bit about generically what that experience was like. And then in the most meaningful experience remarks, what I did is talk a lot more about what I learned from it and maybe even try to tie it back to medicine if you can. Because the chances are if this is supposed to be one of your most meaningful experiences, it should reflect a lot about you. And if it's reflecting a lot about you, you want it to reflect a lot about medicine because you're applying to medicine. So regardless of what it is, try to make that first blurb generic, what it is that you did. But this most meaningful experience remark, try to make that a bit more detailed about maybe how it relates to medicine. So you'll see here my most meaningful experience. One of them was actually a publication I got. So this first part was pretty much all about what is the research that I did. That's all it was. But the second part was, how did this research experience actually contribute to my scientific curiosity? And I talk about a lot here about how this made me realize what exactly science is all about. The fact that scientific verification takes time, it takes energy, it's tedious, it teaches you the importance of the scientific method. And the fact is, to create reproducible results that are based on validity, you really have to stick to something. And so I think I related it back to medicine because, again, this fueled my scientific curiosity, and it also fueled my passion for molecular biology, which I see actually to this day still see becoming integral to the advancement of medicine. So that's the general gist of how I approached the most meaningful experience. The next thing I want to talk about is how to talk about research. So let's say research that is not a most meaningful experience to you. The way I did was try to summarize what your project is about and then go into what you got out of it. So what do I mean by this? Do not by any means go into your thesis level talk. I know for me the tendency was to go into depth about all of my research because there was so much stuff I was passionate about, but the gist is to not do that. So in this one, you'll see that one of my projects was about dosage compensation and C. elegans. And that's fascinating. Trust me, I still think it's fascinating. But unfortunately, most people reading your application don't give two shits about C. elegans, right? And so they just want to know, what is the general gist of this? What is dosage compensation? Some people may not even know that. So explain the general gist of your project and then talk about what you got out of it, right? A lot of these activities, there's limited space. So if you're going to try to get information into it, the most important information will be, what the hell is this? And what did you get out of it? That is it, right? Like if I'm reading your application and you tell me loads and loads about the research you did, but you don't tell me, oh, I wrote a publication on this, or oh, I presented this in front of 500 people, then I don't understand the gravity of this experience. You need to give me something to standardize what exactly it is that you did. So if you can say, I did this generic project. Oh, and by the way, I wrote my honors thesis on it. It's like, oh, okay, that puts it all into perspective. Like, I kind of understand what it's about, but I also understand, like, shit, this was your honors thesis, so it clearly must have been a very big deal, right? And so kind of do both of those things. This formula is not unique to just research. So even when you talk about your service and extracurricular activities, the two most important things are, what did you do and what did you get out of it? So you can see here, again, I followed that formula even when I wrote mine, and I'm not saying by any means mine's good because it's a little cringy, but you'll see that I said I work to create and test incoming labs for students who were joining UC Berkeley's general chemistry class, and these labs were intended to convey certain concepts, and I talked a bit about, two of the different experiments that we tested and ran, and then I talked about what I got out of it, which was the experiments were then integrated into the curriculum and now are a part of it. And so now every freshman that comes into UC Berkeley does these things. So someone who's reading this is like, okay, cool, this is what he did. And oh, wow, like this is the end result, right? Because either of those things on its own is not sufficient. You can tell me what you did, but if you don't give me a tangible measure for what exactly you got out of it, then it doesn't tell me exactly how meaningful it was. And if you tell me how big it was, that's great. It's like, oh, you designed 2 experiments that are now in the curriculum, but what the hell are those experiments, So you need to have both, in my opinion. Next up, I want to talk about hobbies. And you get to have a little fun with hobbies, because I think the AMCAS application everyone takes really seriously, which you should. But when you talk about your hobbies, really go all out in saying what it is you enjoy doing and why you like doing them. And so in your hobbies, feel free to let loose a little. And it doesn't even have to be related to medicine. And so you'll see here I talked about Steph Curry, and I love playing basketball. And I also talked about intramural frisbee and how I competed in both of those things. Again, not related to medicine at all, but use it as a way to talk about yourself as a person outside of medicine. And if your hobbies are related to medicine, then so be it. But at the same time, make sure you're being yourself here. I sprinkled in a bit of humor here, so you'll see like it gave me a chance to put on my best Steph Curry impression. So by adding in a bit of flair, I actually got a lot of feedback from my editors when I was sending this out. They were like, I like this. It's really fun. It shows me that you really like Steph Curry and you really like basketball. And I was like, oh, that's great. Awesome. Thank you. So that's my hint for hobbies. And last but not least, I want to end with awards. This one's a bit tricky, right? Because all of you are really accomplished and you're going to have a lot of awards regardless. But it's really interesting because some of those awards may be linked to the research that you did. And if they're linked to the research that you did, put them in the research that you did, right? Or some of those awards may be linked to, I don't know, whatever extracurricular that you did. Put that there if you can. What I did was I took the awards that were left over from all of those categories that didn't fall into one of my extracurriculars and I lumped them together into one thing. So you'll see here I kind of mentioned my high school, I mentioned a bit about leadership awards, I mentioned a bit about like a research stipend, and none of these fell into my particular categories that I had of activities. So I kind of combined all of them into this one generic awards category. And by having that here, I was able to be like, okay, these are really important to me. These are meaningful to me. That they were very insightful into showing someone I'm capable of academic stuff. I'm capable of research stuff. So I'm going to combine all of them here. And you'll see that next to the award, I summarized a bit about what it was for. Because sometimes you can't just write down an award unless it's like really prestigious. Like if you got the Nobel Prize, you don't have to explain to me what that was. But if you didn't and you got like a random named award that maybe I wouldn't know if I didn't go to UC Berkeley, then explain it. Right? Explain what that award is for so that I can have a bit of context. Don't go too in depth, maybe one sentence, right? And so that's kind of how it is. So I hope you guys found this helpful. It's a really brief video, but just wanted to put it out there because one, you get to see examples of my descriptions. And again, by no means are they good, but also you also can now implement some of these things that I'm hoping will be helpful. So if you like this video, comment, share, subscribe, and follow along because hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of these in the future. Thanks for watching. Peace.